Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalaran, and patch 9.1 is quite a bit away. It is heading over to the PTR in about a week from now, just a little bit more than a week, and we will definitely be covering the new patch over on this channel, in case you want to subscribe, of course. But while waiting for patch 9.1, this is the perfect opportunity to get some alts up and running. And I've been seeing a lot more players starting to kind of take a bit of a break from the mains and start playing their alts, which could be a great time to pass the time until the new patch arrives, learning how the different classes play, trying out the different class covenant combinations you've always wanted, or simply are preparing to make sure you have one of every class leveled to prepare for the new meta changes and class changes happening in patch 9.1. Because you never really know which specs and classes are going to be insanely good and which ones are not going to be that great. So if you want to cover all the bases, level in one of every class makes sense. So in this video, let's go over how I'm preparing all of my alts when it comes to leveling, gearing, and maintenance for patch 9.1. This video is going to be a comprehensive guide of everything I'm doing for my alts. It's going to be a little bit of previous videos we've talked about, like the different gearing processes, the different maintenance processes in terms of which content should be mandatory for your alts and which content I don't think you necessarily have to do, as well as some of the advice from my experience, as I almost have one of every class leveled, and not only am I focusing on getting classes to max level, but also getting them geared, catching them up to the item level of my rogue, and getting them fully finished up with their legendaries as well as the covenant stuff. First bit of recommendation I have is, first of all, the leveling. The fastest leveling right now in Shadowlands is to do Twist of Fate or Dungeons. Dungeons seems to be the fastest way to level, especially if you have a healer or a tank, but also if you have a 5-man group of DPS, then Dungeons can go by very quickly. You can even skip certain bosses and certain trash packs, but Dungeons is also a great place for you to try different builds and try classes and test things out. If you haven't played your alts in a while, Dungeons is a great opportunity for you to test out different playstyles and different talents, and don't be afraid to make wrong decisions inside of Dungeons either. This is the perfect opportunity to test stuff out, and normal Dungeons, there's basically almost zero chance that you're going to fail them. So it's pretty easy experience, but also it gives you experience and time to play with these new classes to find out which playstyles work for you. Another tip I have is to copy those alts to PTR, so you can actually try out all the different covenants. In a live version of the game, if you were to switch covenants, eventually you will be locked out, because it's easy to abandon your covenant and switch, but it's difficult to go back. The covenant decision is very important, and being happy with a covenant you either like because you like playing, or it is the most meta covenant, is an important choice, because as an alt you're not going to have nearly as much time on it as your main. And for your main, rerolling covenants doesn't really seem to take as long. Your main is pretty geared and usually catching up is not that difficult. But for your alts to spend all that time catching up and having to choose a whole nother covenant after you made the wrong choice, whether it's a playstyle option or the meta one, it's usually a hassle. So make sure you're happy with the choice before you go. Next will be gearing your alts. Gearing can sometimes be challenging, but the easiest way to break down gearing is to either do it through PvP or PvE. But before you get into any of the regular content, if you're someone who struggles to find groups, definitely complete your Covenant campaign, as it is quite a bit of easy loot, which will get you started to getting your dailies done and getting your Tourgas done. The item level will definitely help for you to get through some of the basics for your character. If you're looking to level through PvE content, definitely do your callings. Callings is great for PvE because you'll not only amass valor, but sometimes you'll be able to get gear as well as conduits, which can increase the power level of your character. But it's also a great activity overall for PvE, especially if you are someone who doesn't have a lot of luck in groups, especially if that brand new character doesn't have a lot of gear, so it's hard to get those invites. It's also recommended to finish your Covenant campaign so you can get all your soul binds unlocked. It does take a little bit of time, but once you have enough renown, then you can kind of speed through all the quests, and I've done them on a few alts in a single sitting. Certain soulbinds can be mandatory to make those playstyles of those covenants far stronger, so having more options in soulbinds gives you more options in how you play that character in the future. From there on, if you are a PvE player, dungeon spamming is a great opportunity for you to gain some gear, especially if you're going to be doing mythic pluses, especially if your main has any kind of achievements for the dungeon completion, like the KSM. If your main has unlocked the KSM achievement, your alts can actually use Valor to upgrade Mythic Plus gear to a maximum item level of 220. So if you're someone who does dungeons on a regular, this is where you would hop into dungeons, collecting gear as well as Valor points for future upgrades. If you're someone who does a lot of PvP, this is a perfect opportunity to dive into Battlegrounds to get yourself a full set of Valor and then eventually take that gear into RBGs or arenas, start collecting conquest points. And the PvP gearing system, as of right now in Shadowlands, is pretty straightforward in comparison to the PvE. Just PvP, collect points, spend those points in gear and upgrades. If you're someone who wants to do far more content and far more challenging content in the next patch, right now would be a good time for those alts and you mains to start looking for real guilds. Real guilds, not just social guilds, but guilds that actually want to have progression for PvE or PvP. So right now would be a perfect time to start looking. Next, we're going to talk about alt maintenance, some of the things that I think you should do and things you don't really need to do on a weekly basis on your alts. The first thing is world bosses. You definitely should do them, especially when you're trying to get gear and renown for those alts. Eventually, world bosses stop becoming as good, but they're an easy thing you can do once a week, and they show up on the map, and the rewards they grant you in a single boss kill is way too good, especially for freshly geared alts. Then you have your weekly activities to follow, whether it be mythic pluses, to where I usually get 1 key done on most of my characters, or if you're going to be PvPing, get a bit of conquest by capping it, which can be done with a few RBGs or with a couple sessions of arenas. For my alts, I try not to go too ham on the weekly activities like mythic pluses. I don't try to get all 10 dungeons done in a single week on every one of my characters. I feel like they're just way too much, and I have way too many characters to try to balance, so try to commit as much time as you can. And in most cases, I can find time for at least 1 Mythic Plus key of any kind of level for most of my alts, eventually with the goal to try to get them all to be at a gear level and the competitiveness level where they can get at least 15s or 14s done by themselves in pug groups. Raiding I found out of all 3 features of endgame content between PvP and Mythic Pluses, raiding for me seems the slowest way to gear. Unless you have a guild that regularly does heroic runs, finding pug groups for heroics can sometimes be difficult, and I found just mythic pluses can go by way quicker, or PvP to find people to play with can also go by way quicker. Raiding is definitely an option, but out of all the features, I found that pugging it, as well as trying to get a guild group together for it, can sometimes be challenging. Depending on the situation, raiding shouldn't be off the table, but in my experience, it was definitely harder to do. Definitely should do at least a LFR version of the raids if there's a legendary need in those raids, but as for getting like consistent heroics for all of your alts, that can definitely be tricky. Finally, there's Tourgas, and I think you should do enough Tourgas in order to craft your one big class Lego. It's a good idea to do research in terms of which legendaries are the best for your character, or even better to sim your character, whether you're going to be doing mythic pluses, focus on single target like raids, or PvP, and figuring out which is your best legendary. There's a lot of resources out there, from Wowhead guides to other class guides to class discords. Then again, you could also always sim your character to find out what is the best legendary for the variety of activities you're into. So definitely doing research. So then in Tourgas, you can just spend all your soul ash on that one best Lego for the activity you're looking forward to. Can definitely save you a lot of time. The faster you craft your must-have legendary, the faster your character will have a pretty big power spike and start getting a lot better in terms of dungeons or PvP in general. Finally, this is the stuff that you can definitely skip on your alts. AP grinding. There's a lot of players that still believe that AP is necessary for character progression, but all it does is give you cosmetics and covenant upgrades inside of your halls. The covenant upgrades don't really give you any kind of player progression. Sometimes they can give you a bit of soul ash from missions, but generally it's stuff like cosmetics and maybe even appearances. You could definitely skip out on all AP grinding for your character. The maw also can be skipped out as well. There are some things you can get with the maw, like extra sockets, but the value that sockets give on gear is so much smaller than previous expansion of Battle for Azeroth that I feel like for alts it's just not as necessary at all. And plus, doing the maw on every one of your alt characters will drive you insane, so just save yourself some sanity. Also, world quests, you don't also necessarily need to do them. I just do the world quests that I find useful, whether they give me weapons or certain conduits that might be useful for my character, but you don't need to clear the whole map on every one of your alts. Again, save yourself sanity. Finally, Tourgas. This is why you should research which is your best Lego. So if you're not a fan of Tourgas, get your best Lego and be out of Tourgas. Once you get your best Lego, you don't really need to go back to Tourgas. I always see people going back to Tourgas and dreading it, but if you don't enjoy that kind of content, once you got your best in slot Lego, you don't necessarily need to go back for your alts. Again, more sanity saving. And that's going to be my ultimate guide on how to prepare my alts for patch 9.1, some of the tricks that you guys can follow in order to get your alts rolling. Thank you so much for watching. I do hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and which alts are you leveling for patch 9.1. As always, my name is Dalaran, and I'll see all of you guys in another video.